Welcome to this session on scheduling for an inclusive environment. I wanted to share with you just a few tips to get us started that you should think about no matter if you're scheduling for elementary, middle, or high school. First thing is a rule that we use as a guide is that only 30% of the class, if it's co-taught, should probably be students with disabilities. Now, if we were really following the rules of inclusion, we'd have natural proportions, but we know things get in the way, like not every teacher has students with disabilities in their class. We want to use co-teaching, so the teacher might need to be there. So keep that rule in mind. When you get above 30%, we find there starts to be an imbalance in the classroom of kids with so many special needs that it makes it harder and harder to co-teach and collaborate. The other one is balance for behavior and academics. So let's say that I really have no choice. I finish my scheduling and look at it and go, oh, this class has to have 40%. Again, not a recommendation, but if you're stuck there, make sure that you don't have all 40% of the kids having behavioral needs or all 40% having an academic need. So for example, if it's a math class, you don't want all the kids that are struggling with basic skills in there, but maybe you have 5 kids that are struggling behaviorally, 5 kids that are struggling academic, so look for that balance. Make sure too, if you really want inclusive practices to work, you're going to schedule students with disabilities first, not last. And I know that's hard to do, but too many times the sports schedule or the teacher's preference gets in the way. If you really want this to work, you put the kids with disabilities schedule in place and you let all the other variables fall into place. Another one is make sure your schedule is student-driven, not teacher-driven. We highly value teachers. We know they make the school happen, but we want to make sure the schedule serves the students first. And again, the teacher's role may need to shift depending on the shift of the students. So the kids you have scheduled this year for co-teaching, next year might need more intensive intervention or maybe for less. And the goal is always to give kids less and less support at each grade level to make them more independent on their own. And then the last one is teacher protected. We really value teachers in this process, and if you want them to co-teach and collaborate in an inclusive environment, you need to protect their planning time. So our recommendation is first, you put the students in the schedule. Second, then you think about teacher planning time and teachers needing to work together to protect that. And then you let all the other variables fall into place. So let's think about scheduling students at the elementary level. There's some unique challenges at the elementary level because unfortunately most reading classes all happen in the morning at the same time, and your special ed teacher might have to have various roles across the school. But one of the things you want to think about is what level of support do students need? Because remember, one of the rules is student-driven instruction. And so first you might want to think about, do students need to be more in a self-contained setting? Do they need to be more in a co-taught setting? Can they be in facilitative support where, let's say that in this class I'm scheduling students where they need co-teaching, and 2 days a week I'm going to leave the co-taught literacy class for some students with very low level needs. They're really just on monitoring, and I'm going to do facilitative support in another 3rd grade reading class. So again, your special ed teacher might float and serve 2 teachers, one getting a higher dosage of support and one getting that special education light support. And then there's this 4th group that I think we too often forget about for kids with disabilities, even at the elementary level, is do you have kids that can move into areas with no support? So what I recommend is you make a chart similar to the one you see here. And we're going to say that this particular chart we're doing is for our 4th grade language arts. And we're going to have another chart like this for our 5th grade language arts, our 3rd grade language arts, our 2nd grade language arts, again, whatever level of disabilities and grade levels you have in your building. We're then going to have the same chart for math. We're going to have the same chart for science, again, depending on where you're using your resources. One of our rules for scheduling is don't assume you're going to get more teachers. Assume that you've got to do the best with what you've been given. But one of the rules is you cannot sit on the fence. You can't say, well, I'd like to be an inclusive school and schedule all my kids out, but I've got 2 teachers that want all their kids self-contained. Again, if you keep doing that, you're never going to have enough resources. So, I've got a schedule like this. I'm going to take a simple Post-it note, and I'm going to say, all right, what do we know about Don Shea? Well, he really is doing very well in language arts in 3rd grade. So perhaps he can be in a facilitative support model next year. And we're going to start the scheduling starting in January or February. And then we're going to say, all right, what about Angel? How's Angel doing? Well, she's been doing fairly good in the class, but I think she could really benefit next year from co-taught. Then we're going to move to Tom. We're going to say Tom doesn't need any support. We're then going to say, well, let's think about Nate. Nate was in self-contained, but we're not sure for next year. Let's put him in the middle. And then we move to Josh, who probably needs to be in co-taught. We're going to think about Nigel being in facilitative support. And again, you want to be clear on what these definitions mean and what that support looks like. Gwen, we hope next year will not need support. And I'm just going to put a couple up here so I can show you what we're going to think about doing. And then we've got Sam, and of course this list could go on and on. Well, currently it looks like in 4th grade, we've done such a great job with our early intervention in 3rd grade that in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, that we don't have as many students needing as much intensive intervention. But now we want to ask ourselves a second question. Do they need intervention in the language arts class because they have academic issues or they have behavioral issues? And I often recommend you just add a little B or an A to each name. And so all 4 of these students have academic needs. Now, if there's 20 kids in a class, we could have up to 6 kids in co-taught. If you know you're a transient school where lots of kids are going to move in, you might even want to add a couple of post-it notes here that say the following. And we're going to do ghost for 2 kids. Because we assume 2 new kids are going to move in and need to be co-taught. And now if another student moves in this semester, and this is something we leave somewhere, I've got one group that leaves it in the janitor's closet, somewhere that we can go back and look at it regularly and say, all right, next year we do need at least 1 period of co-taught 4th grade language arts. Now we get to math, these post-it notes may completely move, and it might we need more co-taught in math, we may need less, but this is the basics of how you start your scheduling. When you have this all done, you step back and reflect. And the last tip I would share with you is to make sure it's seamless as possible. What do I mean by that? That if in 3rd grade, Josh was in self-contained and now he's in co-taught, in 5th grade, we don't want to try to move Josh backwards. We want to keep trying to move these post-it notes to the level of what we really want for kids with disabilities is they're in the general education setting with little to no support. So let's talk about scheduling with specific issues for the middle school. One of the things we have to think about in the middle school is how are we going to align our special education teachers? Are we going to align them to be content specific? So I'm going to be the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math teacher that works with co-teaching and collaboration in the math classes, or am I going to be assigned to a team? I'm going to be the 6th grade special ed team leader. Sometimes I have to be split across math and science, or I have to be split across the 6th and 7th grade team. Again, the better the alignment, the better you can have services outcomes for kids with disabilities. So let's now start to schedule based on which one I'm going to be. And we're going to pretend today that I'm aligned by content. But again, the scheduling process would be the same either way. What we want to do is we want to have a chart something like this. And we'd have one chart for each content area. We're going to schedule for co-teaching, facilitative support, or inclusive practices. And at the top of our chart, we're going to have self-contained. We're going to have, because some kids might need that model, we're going to have co-taught for those students who are ready to be supported in the general ed setting. We're going to have facilitative support, which means that I'm going to just go in and check on the teacher and provide services in either co-planning, co-instructing to the teacher. Or we're going to have some students at the middle school that we hope have had such great interventions at the early grade levels they need no support at all. So, putting kids in the classroom, I start to think about the schedule. So I've got a few fictitious kids here for us to think about. And we start to think about Angel. And let's say that we're going to make this our 7th grade math. So we're going to have one of these charts for 6th grade math, one of these charts for 8th grade math. And I happen to be the teacher who's going to be supporting in math. And so I at least know something about the kids. I've talked to the 5th grade students that are coming in, and we're going to start scheduling this in January or February. The earlier, the better. And I say, okay, well, Angel, I have him this year in math. I already know him really well. And I would tell you that I think he needs to continue in co-taught. And then let's think about Sam. I think Sam probably should continue in my co-taught setting. Now, Tom, I'm really hoping, I believe right now we can move him over to facilitative support. And then I have the discussion. I was like, you know what? Gwen is doing so well. I'm barely monitoring her at all. I think it's time to move her out. Jose, I think also was successful this year with no support. I assume will continue. Jose might need some support in language arts, but he doesn't need it in mathematics. Don Shea, I'm going to try facilitative support because he's really got that homework issue out of the way, and I think that was really standing in his way of success. And then I'm going to let Nigel stay in co-taught with me, and I think we'll have Josh in there, not because he's academically challenged, but because sometimes behavior gets in the way of his learning. And then I'm going to add because I know we have a lot of kids that move into the middle school in the first few weeks of school. I'm going to go ahead and schedule and assume I'm going to have 2 more students, and we're going to call them Ghost. And I'd like to create the schedule for the Ghost student that supports co-teaching so that I don't get my class over that 30% natural proportions. So with this schedule now, I can look and say, wow, what we really are hoping for and what we should be looking for in middle school is really we aren't going to offer a self-contained math class this year. And that's really going to be the goal towards your inclusive practices. Now, if a student has severe behavior problems, they really have that need, it's again part of that continuum of services, but that's really where we want to be going. And we want to move each year, each one of these students as far away as possible so that they're more and more independent. The last thing I would do in my schedule, I would list a B for behavior and an A for academic next to each of these students, so that when we schedule, if we start to tip that scale at the middle school, and it happens quite often, that maybe we end up having to have 9 students in the class, we try to have 5 kids with behavior and 4 kids with academic needs would not be our recommendation at all. In a class of 20, we'd recommend no more than 6. But if that happens, again, giving you that balance. Last thing in middle school, critically important, if you do the schedule first, and you know I've already got 6 kids with disabilities in this class, do not put in the 7th grade math class 20 other kids who need facilitative support or co-teaching that don't have an IEP. You want this to have the rest of the students in the class to be positive peer models who are being successful in mathematics, so we have a natural balance in the class. Welcome to scheduling for the high school. So some things that are unique at the high school is typically what I recommend at the high school level, unless you're